Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we are wrestling with one of life's really big paradoxes, I think, something that, well, modern life just trains us not to accept. We're diving into failure, collapse, and the sort of unexpected wisdom you might find when things fall apart.
That's exactly it. And our sources for this deep dive, they're rooted in ancient Taoist philosophy, but honestly, they speak so directly to the kind of anxiety a lot of us feel today in the 21st century.
Right.
The core idea we're exploring is, well, it's simple, but feels pretty radical. Why do we react so badly when life unravels? The career path crumbles, a relationship dissolves, or maybe it's just the sheer exhaustion of keeping up appearances.
Yeah, that constant performance.
Exactly. Why do we meet that with fear and resistance when maybe, just maybe, those moments are actually necessary, like prerequisites for finding some kind of genuine wholeness?
It feels completely backwards, doesn't it? We're taught, build, structure, optimize, control everything.
Always control.
So when things break down, the immediate thought is, okay, I failed. I messed up the system. But this Taoist perspective we found in the texts, it suggests something else entirely. It's this invitation to just actively let it be.
And that letting be, that's
Yeah.
really the key we need to unpack for you today, because it's so easily mistaken for, I don't know, apathy or just giving up.
Excessivity.
But it's far from that. So our mission here is pretty specific. We want to pull out the core usable insights from these sources, insights that can help you shift internally from that constant fight against chaos.
Which is exhausting.
Totally exhausting. Shift from that fight towards something more like harmonizing with life's inherent messiness. We want to show how Taoism fundamentally isn't about fixing your life in the way we usually think of fixing.
Okay.
It's much more about aligning with its fundamental nature, its cycles.
That reframe, wow, it changes the energy immediately. If the goal is in control, then what is it?
Good question.
Because we spend so much time and energy building defenses, patching cracks, trying to avoid any sign of weakness, what happens if we just stop? Let's get into that idea of surrender, because honestly, to the modern ear, surrender sounds an awful lot like giving up, like total defeat.
Yeah, it absolutely sounds like defeat, but only because our culture tends to equate strength with, well, rigidity and control with safety or security.
Right. Being tough, being in charge.
Exactly. But just look at the evidence around us. Anything that's perfectly rigid, what happens under pressure?
It snaps.
It snaps. So in Taoism, surrender is actually framed as the ultimate act of strength. Why? Because it's about aligning with reality. It's this deep recognition that your individual will, no matter how strong or determined, is just a tiny part of this massive, unstoppable flow of nature, of existence.
That's a beautiful concept. But, I can hear the skeptical listener thinking, okay, fine, but if I stop striving so hard, if I stop trying to control my career or my relationships, how do I know I'm practicing Taoist surrender and not just, being lazy or undisciplined?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the difference, I think, really lies in the internal experience.
Yeah.
Surrender, in this context, it's about releasing the forcing.
Forcing.
Yeah, it's stopping that exhausting performance of pretending everything's fine when it's not.
Right.
Or stopping the chase after goals that, if you're honest with yourself, feel kind of hollow.
Goals based on what other people think.
Exactly. Goals driven by external validation, not what genuinely resonates inside you. When you let go of that constant forcing, you create space. It turns out the striving itself was the cage.
Ah.
And when you stop striving like that, this profound sense of freedom can just emerge
Yeah.
almost immediately.
There's a line in the sources, something like, the more I unraveled, the more I began to feel free. That really hits home. It's just letting go of that false self, that performance.
Right.
It's actually lighter than holding on to it.
Oh, it's significantly lighter.
Yeah.
Think about the sheer psychological weight we carry trying to control things that are fundamentally uncontrollable.
Like other people's opinions.
Or the stock market, or just random chance. When you stop chasing that illusion of control, what replaces it isn't chaos, it's actual tangible freedom. And we see this principle everywhere in the Taoist's favorite teacher, nature itself.
Okay, so give us some of those natural examples. How does nature show strength through yielding?
Well, the classic example, the one everyone points to, is bamboo.
Right.
Think about a really fierce storm. A big, strong oak tree, which seems so solid and rigid. What often happens?
It can get uprooted or branches snap off.
Exactly. But the bamboo, which looks so much more fragile, it bends. It yields to the wind, sometimes bending almost flat to the ground. And then when the storm passes, it just springs back up, unharmed. Its strength isn't in resisting the force, it's in its flexibility, its ability to yield.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the river, it doesn't try to blast its way through a mountain with brute force.
No dynamite involved.
Right, it just yields. It flows around the hard rock, finding the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
But, and this is the crucial part, over long periods, through that constant soft yielding, what does the river do?
It carves the canyon. It wears down the mountain.
Exactly, wears down the strongest, most rigid material on Earth. So, true strength, in this view, isn't about imposing your force. It's about flexibility, non-resistance. And when you practice that kind of surrender internally, that frantic, striving energy gets replaced by this feeling of, well, stillness, but an alive stillness.
Not a dead stillness.
No, not at all. And peace starts to emerge from accepting things as they are, not from trying to force everything into some perfect, rigid order.
Yeah. This idea of losing harmony because you're trying too hard, forcing things, it leads us straight to that really powerful observation from Lao Tzu about how societies, or maybe even individuals, drift away from that natural flow, the Tao.
Yeah, Lao Tzu's progression is fascinating because it's essentially a warning against trying too hard to fix things once the natural harmony is lost. He shows how our attempts to re-engineer that harmony often just push us further away from the source.
He lays it out so clearly. It's almost like a sociological diagnosis. He says, when the Tao is lost, there is goodness.
Okay, step one.
Then, when goodness is lost, there is morality.
Step two.
And finally, when morality is lost, there is ritual.
Let's spend a bit of time on this sequence because it feels like it gets to the heart of why things can feel so fragmented or inauthentic today. The Tao, that's the source. It's the unforced, spontaneous, effortless harmony of just being.
Right, the natural state.
When a society, or maybe just you as an individual, falls out of that natural state, the first instinct is to fix it. And the first fix is goodness.
Which he means as a conscious effort, right? Like actively trying to be kind or ethical. Deliberately doing good deeds.
Exactly. It's deliberate. It requires effort. But then what happens when that conscious effort becomes strained? Or maybe inconsistent? Or it feels like too much work?
Then you need rules.
You need rules. So goodness starts to fade. And it gets replaced by morality. Morality is like the codified version of goodness. It's systems of laws, duties, obligations, things that tell you how you should act.
Instead of just acting that way naturally because it flows from who you are.
Precisely. And that's when it starts to feel less like genuine connection or kindness and more like performance, obligation. You follow the rules to avoid getting in trouble or to look good, not necessarily because your heart is in it.
Yeah, I can see that. It becomes external.
Very external.
Yeah.
And the final stage, the furthest point from the Tao, is ritual. When even upholding the moral code becomes too difficult or maybe just too inconvenient. Humanity, or the individual, retreats into ritual. Rituals are the external structures, the elaborate procedures, the excessive posturing, the outward motions that are meant to look like the real thing, but they compensate for a loss of the inner substance, the inner authenticity.
So thinking about today, could that be like overly complex corporate processes that don't actually achieve anything? Or maybe those really curated social media personas?
Absolutely perfect examples. Or elaborate ceremonies that have lost their original spiritual meaning and just become motions you go through.
Like ticking boxes.
Exactly. We get obsessed with the external signs, the job title, the certification, the perfectly worded email, the right buzzwords, because the internal essence, the connection to the Tao, is gone. It's all performance, all appearance, very little spirit.
So Taoism comes in as this radical antidote. It's not saying, okay, let's create better rituals or stricter moral.
No, quite the opposite.
It's saying, slow down, turn inward, simplify. Remember that rhythm, that natural harmony you had before all this external conditioning, all these layers of goodness, morality, and ritual got piled on top.
It really is the ultimate act of subtraction, isn't it? Taking things away, not adding more. And that subtraction, that peeling back the layers, it often requires us to go through the very thing we're most afraid of.
Yeah.
The breakdown, the falling apart of those artificial structures we built.
Okay, so this brings us right to that moment of collapse. The sacred deconstruction, as the sources call it. The idea is that when our outer life, career, relationship, identity falls apart, this external mess is actually needed to help us realign internally. But let's be real. If you're the listener going through a layoff or a painful breakup, hearing this is sacred deconstruction might feel, well, pretty unhelpful. It feels like a threat, not a gift.
Of course it does. That feeling of threat, that's the ego fighting like hell to hold on to the old structure, the false self. But from the Taoist perspective, that falling apart is a kind of purification.
Purification from what?
From that conditioned identity,
Mm.
from all those layers of shoulds and musts, the morality and ritual Lao Tzu talked about that were never really you in the first place. When the scaffolding you built around your identity starts to crumble,
Yeah.
the true structure underneath, the one that's actually much more resilient, finally gets a chance to be revealed.
Can we make that false self more concrete? In a modern context, what parts of us need that purification?
Think about how much identity gets wrapped up in, say, professional status, your job title, your LinkedIn profile, that perfected, curated image of competence and success.
Right. The highlight reel.
Exactly.
Right.
Or maybe it's the constant need to prove your worth through productivity, through being busy, through external validation. When you lose the job, or when that carefully crafted image gets shattered, the collapse of that external thing causes intense pain, no doubt.
For sure.
But simultaneously, it forces you, maybe for the first time, to look for value internally, independent of those temporary external labels. That's the inner realignment starting to happen.
So how do you know if you're in a breakthrough versus just a breakdown? Is there a way to recognize this positive shift happening amidst the chaos? What's the Taoist signature, as the sources put it?
It's often marked by a subtle shift in your emotional landscape, a kind of growing spaciousness, maybe. You might find yourself observing the absurdity of it all, and maybe even laughing sometimes.
Even when things are objectively bad.
Yeah, because you start to accept, on a deeper level, that life is inherently unpredictable, chaotic. When tears come, they might feel different, more like a cleansing release of pent-up tension, rather than something destructive or overwhelming. And maybe most critically, you start to accept the presence of fear or uncertainty without letting it dictate your actions. You feel the fear, but it doesn't paralyze you in the same way.
That difference, accepting fear but not letting it control you, that feels huge. Usually the instinct is to fight the fear, to push it away, which just creates more tension. Right.
Exactly. And that tension, that resistance to the feeling, that's where suffering really takes root. This is such a critical Taoist idea. Pain loses its power when it's no longer resisted.
Say that again. Pain loses its power when it's not resisted.
Right. Pain itself, physical or emotional, is pretty much inevitable. It's part of being alive.
Yeah.
But suffering is different. Suffering is what happens when we cling to the pain, when we fight against the present moment, when we build a whole story around how terrible things are.
The narrative we add on top.
Precisely. If you can allow the pain to just be there without layering on all the resistance and the self-pity and the why me, it starts to transform. It clarifies things. It becomes the very catalyst that forces you to finally let go of that rigid need for control.
And that clarity, that letting go, that's the doorway into the core Taoist practice for navigating life, isn't it? The one that guides how we act from this newly cleared space. Wu Wei.
Ah, yes, Wu Wei. Probably the most subtle and definitely the most frequently misunderstood concept in the whole philosophy.
Because it translates as non-doing, right? Which sounds, well, lazy.
Exactly. It gets translated as non-doing or non-action. And especially for people steeped in our modern hustle culture, the immediate reaction is, okay, so this is just a fancy excuse to be lazy or passive, to just give up.
Okay, so challenge time. Because in a world that feels increasingly competitive, if I stop doing things, if I stop pushing, driving, hustling, won't I just get left behind? How does Wu Wei possibly work with needing to, actually act and take responsibility?
That's absolutely the right question to ask, and the answer is crucial. Wu Wei is emphatically not inaction. It is not about abandoning responsibility. It's about informed, effortless action.
Okay, informed and effortless.
Yes, action that arises naturally from being deeply aligned with the flow of things around you. It actually requires incredible awareness and efficiency. It means acting from a place of harmony, so your effort feels minimal, because you're not forcing an outcome against the current. You're cooperating with the circumstances as they are.
So it's not about doing nothing.
Not at all. It's about doing nothing unnecessary, nothing that comes from ego or forcing or fighting the situation.
Maximum effect, minimum wasted effort. That makes more sense. But we need examples. This feels abstract. How does it look in practice?
Okay, the surfer. It's the classic, maybe perfect metaphor for Wu Wei.
Right.
Does the surfer create the wave?
No, of course not. That would be impossible.
Exactly. It would require insane amounts of force. What does the surfer do instead?
They wait. They watch the ocean. They judge the wave.
They observe. They calculate the energy, the timing, the direction of the wave. And then they align their body, their board, with the water's existing power and flow. They ride this immense natural force. But their personal effort, while skillful, is relatively minimal because they're using the wave's energy. They're not fighting it. They're harmonizing with it. They yield to the power to use the power.
That's a really different mindset, shifting from I have to create the force to I need to skillfully conduct the force that's already here.
Perfectly put. You become a conductor, not the generator. Now, think back to the tree we talked about earlier, the bamboo or even a willow. It shows wu-wei in its resilience.
By bending.
By bending, exactly. It doesn't actively push back against the wind. Its strength is its non-resistance. And the river gives us that third crucial element, softness and persistence.
Right, wearing down the rock over time.
Through softness, through yielding, through just following the natural path, it achieves its goal reaching the sea, shaping the land not with a single explosion of force, but with sustained, gentle action aligned with gravity and terrain. Wu-wei is this constant recognition that ultimately the soft overcomes the hard, the slow overcomes the fast.
Okay, but how does this translate to my life? My overflowing inbox, my packed schedule? What does practical non-striving look like when the demands feel overwhelming?
It starts with honoring your internal state, your energy levels, maybe more than you honor the demands of your calendar or your to-do list.
Ooh, that's radical.
It is. In our culture, we're trained to push through, optimize every second, operate at maximum force all the time, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether the task is actually meaningful or if we even have the energy for it.
Yeah. Productivity guilt is real.
Totally. So wu-wei in practice might mean pausing before you jump into action and asking yourself,
Sure.
is this aligned? Does this feel like flow? Or am I trying to force something here? And that translates down to the small everyday decisions, like maybe not forcing that conversation that feels really strained right now, letting it breathe.
Okay.
Or maybe it's canceling plans that honestly feel heavy and draining when you check in with yourself, recognizing that canceling isn't laziness. It's actually an act of preserving your energy, staying aligned.
It's respecting your own capacity.
Yes. And acknowledging when you're in an inner winter, those times of burnout, uncertainty, or just needing rest. Wu-wei means respecting that season instead of trying to force springtime productivity when you're feeling like it's December inside.
This really does challenge the whole societal script. Everything tells us if you're not pushing, forcing, visibly striving, you're falling behind. You're becoming irrelevant.
And that's the great paradox Taoism presents. This non-striving, this focus on aligned, essential action. It actually leads to a more authentic, more sustainable kind of effectiveness.
Okay.
It's an effectiveness judged not by the sheer volume of things you get done, but by the meaning, the quality, the ease, the flow with which they were achieved. You end up achieving more of what truly matters, often by doing less frantic, forced activity, because the less you do is perfectly timed, aligned, and draws on that larger natural current instead of just draining your own limited battery.
So let's talk about the results then. If we manage to actually do this, let go of that white-knuckled grip on control, commit to this art of allowing, practice wu-wei, how does life start to feel different? Does the world actually start to, cooperate more?
It often feels that way, yes.
Yeah.
Like life shifts from being a constant battle or competition to something more like a collaboration.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
When you stop desperately trying to micromanage every single detail, force every outcome, you free up your attention. You can actually see what's really going on around you, respond to the actual environment instead of just your own projections.
And that's when weird coincidences happen, synchronicities.
That's often when synchronicities seem to pop up more.
Yeah. The right opportunity appears just when you needed it. The right person calls. You stumble across the exact piece of information you were missing. These things start to arrive more often without you having to chase them down aggressively.
Why do you think that happens?
Well, one way to think about it is, when you're hyper-focused on forcing one specific outcome, you basically have tunnel vision. You miss all the other possibilities, maybe even better ones, that are emerging naturally just outside your narrow focus. By practicing allowing, by opening your awareness, you create space for the Tao, that underlying intelligence or pattern of the universe, to kind of guide you towards paths that have less resistance and are ultimately more effective for you. But this idea of non-force, of things coming to you, it just runs so counter to the prevailing narrative of success, doesn't it? Especially in Western culture. We celebrate the CEO who breaks all the rules, the entrepreneur who grinds 20 hours a day.
Absolutely. It's a direct challenge to that narrative. And the Taoist maxim offers this completely different measure of power and effectiveness. The soft overcomes the hard. The slow overcomes the fast.
It sounds nice, but is it practical?
I think it's incredibly practical, both physically and socially. Think about systems organizations, even ecosystems. Those built on rigidity, forced into unnatural speeds, constantly pushing, what happens to them?
They burn out, they break, they become brittle.
Exactly. But the system or the person that yields, that flows, that adapts, that takes the necessary time,
Hmm.
that's what endures. That's what ultimately shapes the landscape in a sustainable way.
So the core lesson is stop fighting life. Stop trying to impose our own limited, ego-driven plans onto everything.
Pretty much. It's about recognizing that there's a much greater intelligence at play. And our job is less about dictating the tune and more about creating the space for that larger song to be played through us.
Which brings us to that fantastic analogy from the sources, the flute. Explain how being like a hollow flute helps someone trying to navigate, say, a competitive field.
Right, the flute analogy is brilliant because it highlights what needs to be removed.
Hmm.
To make beautiful music, what does a flute need to be?
It needs to be hollow, empty inside.
Exactly, empty of obstruction. So if we want life's music, the expression of the Tao, to flow through us clearly, we need to empty ourselves. Empty ourselves of what? Of the need to control, of rigid expectations, and maybe most importantly, of the ego's constant demands.
Okay, emptying the ego in a competitive job market. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means learning to separate your fundamental sense of self-worth from your external achievements or output. The ego constantly craves applause, recognition, validation. It needs to be seen as successful, competent, right?
Yep.
When you work on emptying that, you can still perform your job with incredible skill and diligence. That's wu-wei in action. But you do it without that crippling need for the outcome to validate your existence. You do the work because it's the right action, because it feels aligned, maybe even joyful, not purely because you need the promotion or the praise to feel okay about yourself.
So it's the difference between doing good work and desperately needing everyone to notice you doing good work.
Precisely. By getting your ego out of the way, you become a clearer channel. Your actions become less cluttered with anxiety and neediness and, paradoxically, often become more effective and impactful.
And nature, again, just keeps showing us this everywhere we look, doesn't it?
It's the ultimate nonstop demonstration. We just have to remember to look and learn. Think about trees in winter. Do they feel guilty for not producing leaves?
No, they just rest.
They rest. They conserve energy. They honor the season of contraction, knowing spring will come. We humans need to learn to honor our own inner winters, those periods of burnout, grief, uncertainty, necessary rest, without piling on the judgment that we're failing or being unproductive or lazy.
Instead of trying to force spring blossoms in the middle of a blizzard.
Exactly. Or think about water flowing downhill.
Yeah.
Does it agonize over which path is the most prestigious or impressive?
No, it just finds the easiest way down.
It finds the path of least resistance, the most efficient route to the sea. We're often taught the opposite, that the harder path, the one with the most resistance, must be the most valuable. Taoism flips that. Efficiency comes through yielding, through finding the natural flow.
Like the sun rising without asking permission or the moon glowing without needing applause.
Perfect examples of effortless action. They just are. They do what they do. So we need to stop trying to force productivity when we're in those low energy states, those periods of inner uncertainty. We need to welcome the rest as necessary and regenerative. Rushing rarely leads to true success. Alignment does.
Okay, so as someone goes deeper into this path, letting go, aligning with flow, practicing wu-wei, what happens to how they see the world? Does that constant battle between good, bad, success, failure start to dissolve?
That really seems to be the goal, or maybe the natural outcome, of this kind of inner development. You develop a different kind of emotional maturity. A key part of that is moving beyond those rigid black and white categories.
You stop labeling everything instantly. This is good, this is bad.
Yeah, you start to see that most experiences, maybe all experiences, contain their opposites. That moment of apparent failure holds the seeds of crucial learning. That moment of great success might contain the hidden danger of complacency or arrogance.
The seed of the next phase is always there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You begin to make peace with paradox. You realize life isn't either chaos or order. It's somehow simultaneously both. It's pain and beauty together. So the striving shifts. You stop striving for this impossible ideal of external perfection.
Which is often just static and lifeless anyway.
Right. And you start striving simply to be real, to be authentic, to be present with what is. And this incredible realization can dawn. The whole idea that you were fundamentally broken and needed fixing was maybe just wrong.
Wow.
You weren't broken. You were perhaps blooming, but maybe stuck in the wrong conditions, trying to fit into a structure that wasn't right for you. The falling apart wasn't destruction. It was the necessary clearing, the weeding, to make space for your authentic self to emerge.
So the whole journey isn't about adding more, achieving some grand complex state. It's about subtraction and unbecoming.
Precisely. It's about becoming simpler, clearer, more essential. And this is captured perfectly in that famous quote from Lao Tzu. It draws this stark contrast between knowledge and wisdom. We spend our whole lives chasing knowledge. But wisdom, he suggests, requires a totally different approach.
Remind us of that quote. It really cuts through.
It's so simple and so profound. To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day.
That just lands differently, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It challenges almost every system we live in, education, career progression. Everything is about accumulation. More skills, more credentials, more money, more experiences, more stuff. Accumulation.
But Taoist wisdom says the real prize, the serenity, comes from the clarity you get by letting go.
Which forces that crucial question. Okay, what exactly are we supposed to be removing every day?
Yeah. What gets subtracted?
Well, according to these texts, it's the heavy stuff. The baggage of the ego, that relentless need to control everything, the fear of not being good enough, the compulsion to always be right, the exhausting effort to make sure everyone understands you perfectly.
Letting go of needing to manage everyone's perception of you?
Yes, that subtraction, removing those burdens, is what creates space, real internal space. It allows for silence. And it's in that silence, that inner spaciousness, that genuine peace, real serenity can actually be found.
So the path leads from complexity and accumulation back to simplicity and clarity. The goal isn't to be full, but maybe to be empty
Yeah.
in that flute sense. That seems to be the ultimate realization. The Tao, the path, seems to give you less ego, less striving, less fear, less clutter. And paradoxically, in that very lessness, in that profound simplicity, you discover you actually have everything that matters.
That's wholeness.
That's wholeness, the complexity, the constant striving, the drama. Those are the distractions, the collapse, the falling apart. That was maybe just the universe clearing the slate, giving you the chance to finally hear and align with the natural pulse of existence that was there underneath it all along. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really unpacked centuries of subtle wisdom, I feel, and hopefully translated it into something genuinely useful for navigating life today. Let's try to boil it down to a quick digest for you, summarizing the absolute essential takeaways we've pulled from these sources.
Okay, first, really try to internalize that chaos, collapse, falling apart. These aren't the end of the road. They're not failures. See them instead as potential gateways. Gateways to waking up, to necessary realignment. True peace doesn't come from forcing control. It comes from surrender, from accepting the flow.
Second takeaway. Remember that crucial difference between pain and suffering. Pain happens. It's part of life. Suffering is what we add through resistance. When you stop resisting the pain, it loses its grip. It transforms, often into clarity.
Third, Wu Wei. It's the core practice. It's not laziness. It's not passivity. It's deep alignment leading to informed, effortless action. Aim for maximum effectiveness with minimum forcing. Think surfer, not bulldozer.
Fourth, look to nature. It's your constant teacher, reflecting these truths back all the time. We're cyclical beings, just like the seasons. Honor your inner winters, allow for rest, uncertainty, contraction, without layering on guilt or shame.
And finally, the path to wisdom, maybe even enlightenment, isn't about adding more complexity. It's about simplicity. It's the art of just being, rather than constantly striving to become something else. True wisdom is found through subtraction, letting go of ego, fear, and that illusion of control.
So, as you go back into your day, we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on, something to maybe explore for yourself. Building on everything we've discussed, if you truly deeply accepted this core Taoist idea that your well-being, your strength, actually comes from letting go of rigidity and the need for control, what would immediately change for you? What cherished structure, what role, what tightly held expectation in your life, maybe your professional image, a packed schedule you hate, a belief about how things should be, what would you finally give yourself permission to allow to fall apart? Knowing, or at least trusting, that this falling apart might actually be the most powerful, most necessary form of realignment you could possibly experience right now.